He didn't even get a hello. The moment Jamal stepped into that luxury dealership, it was like the air shifted. Bright lights, polished floors, and a sea of sharp suits. Everyone else seemed to belong there. Everyone. Except him. He wasn't dressed for the occasion. Plain jeans, a light blue t-shirt, sneakers just starting to wear at the edges. No gold watch, no designer labels. Just a man who knew what he wanted. But apparently, knowing wasn't enough. As Jamal approached the red Lamborghini he'd been dreaming about for years, a salesman with slicked back hair and a tailored navy suit intercepted him. Not with a smile, not with a, "What can I help you with today?" but with a smirk. "You lost, buddy?" Cars like this, let's just say they're a little out of reach. Jamal kept his cool. "I'm interested in buying." That only made the salesman laugh, loud enough for a few other staff members to glance over, sharing the joke. "Sure you are, and I'm next in line for the NBA draft." A few of the other customers chuckled. Jamal felt the weight of every eye in the room, that old, familiar sting. Not just judgment, humiliation. And then came the final blow. The salesman gestured casually toward the back of the building. "You'll find the used cars out that door. Might be a better fit." That was it. No pitch, no walk around, no keys jingling with possibility. Just dismissal. But here's the thing. What that salesman didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jamal wasn't just some dreamer walking in off the street. In his pocket wasn't just a wallet. It was the deed to their reality check. And in 10 minutes, everything in that dealership was about to change. Jamal stood still for a moment, feeling the burn of their laughter settle into the pit of his stomach. He'd been here before. Not this exact dealership, but this exact moment. Different faces. Same story. The salesman had already turned his back, assuming Jamal would slink off in embarrassment. Another dreamer deterred. Another waste of time handled. But Jamal wasn't moving. The crazy part? Some of the other customers started watching with that look. The one that said, "Why doesn't he just leave?" Like somehow, he was the one making things uncomfortable. And then, a woman, probably in her 40s, leaned over to her husband and whispered, just loud enough, why would they let him near that car in the first place? It wasn't just the staff now. It was the crowd. Strangers adding fuel to the fire, confirming what the salesman had assumed the moment Jamal walked through the door. That he didn't belong here. That he was wasting their time. That success had a look, and Jamal didn't have it. The salesman reappeared, holding a clipboard like he had more important things to do. "Listen, man, no offense, but we're really busy today. Unless you've got serious business, maybe come back when..." Jamal didn't let him finish. Without a word, he turned and headed toward the exit. And as he walked past the rows of gleaming cars, past the judging stares and the forced chuckles, something inside him shifted. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even hurt anymore. He was ready. Because unlike the salesman, unlike the whispering couple, unlike the entire staff in their pressed suits and polished shoes, Jamal knew what was about to happen next. He wasn't going home. He was making a call. And the next time he walked through those doors, it wouldn't be as a customer. It would be as the man who owned every single car in the building. See, what the salesman and everyone else in that room didn't realize was that this wasn't just about a car. For Jamal, this moment hit deeper, way deeper. Because ever since he was a kid, he'd been fighting the same battle. Growing up in a rough part of the city, Jamal learned early that respect wasn't given. It was withheld. Teachers assumed he'd never graduate. Store clerks watched him like a hawk. Even neighbors crossed the street when they saw him coming. His mom used to tell him, "You've got to work twice as hard to get half as far." And he did. By the time he was 16, Jamal was juggling 2 jobs to help his mom pay the rent. Fast food during the day, cleaning offices at night. While other kids were out chasing dreams, Jamal was chasing survival. But here's the thing. That fire, it never went out. He'd spend his breaks reading business books, watching online courses on his cracked phone, writing out plans in a beat-up notebook. While people laughed at him for thinking big, Jamal was quietly building the life they said he'd never have. By 25, he'd launched his first business, a small logistics company, scraped together with grit, borrowed money, and more late nights than he could count. And when that company took off, he didn't stop. He invested, flipped properties, partnered with other small businesses. Now, Jamal was the silent owner of 3 growing companies and had enough in assets to buy 10 of those luxury cars if he wanted to. But no matter how far he climbed, moments like this kept happening. The suits, the stares, the disbelief, like success had a dress code he'd never quite fit. So standing in that dealership, hearing those words, "People like you can't afford this," it wasn't just another insult. It was a reminder that, in their eyes, no matter how much he built, how much he earned, how much he proved, he'd always be just a guy in jeans. But not for much longer. Because Jamal wasn't just planning to buy a car today. He was about to buy the narrative they tried to write for him, and rewrite it himself. Jamal stepped out into the warm afternoon air, letting the dealership door close behind him. The laughter, the judgment, the whispers, all of it stayed inside. Out here, it was quiet, clear. He took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his phone. Not the newest model, no diamond-studded case, just a simple device that had helped him build an empire. He scrolled to a name saved under a single word: partner. Marcus. His right-hand man, business strategist, and the person who'd helped Jamal pull off some of his boldest moves yet. He tapped call. "Yo, everything good?" Marcus answered. Jamal didn't waste time. It's time. There was a pause, the kind that only happens when 2 people already know what the other is thinking. "You're sure?" Marcus asked. "They made it real easy," Jamal replied. The plan wasn't new. Months ago, they'd been scouting potential dealership investments. Jamal wanted to expand into luxury car sales, not just for profit, but to create a space where people like him wouldn't have to face the humiliation he just experienced. This very dealership had been on their shortlist. Profitable, but with management problems. And now, fate had just handed him the perfect reason to make his move. But here's the crazy part. The salesman and his coworkers still thought Jamal had left in shame, that he was off sulking somewhere, maybe calling a family member to complain about the bad service. They had no idea he was already working on a deal to take ownership. As Marcus started making calls to their lawyer and the dealership's owner, Jamal looked back through the window. The salesman was laughing again, probably telling the story of the broke guy who tried to test drive a Lamborghini. His coworkers nodded along. Jamal didn't get angry. He smiled. Because in about 10 minutes, they'd learned the difference between judging a man by his clothes and judging him by his power. And Jamal? He was done being underestimated. Inside the dealership, the salesman had moved on. He was now busy showing a young couple a silver convertible, still chuckling to himself every few minutes. To him, Jamal was just another story to tell at lunch. But outside, a much bigger story was being written. Marcus had already connected with the dealership's owner, Mr. Blake, a man in his early 60s, more focused on golf and retirement than the day-to-day business. They'd spoken before. Casual interest. No serious talks. But this time, we're ready to make an offer. Full ownership. Fast. Mr. Blake hesitated for a moment. "That's sudden. Your numbers are down. Turnover's high. Your management team's reputation, let's just say it's not exactly glowing." Marcus didn't mince words. Blake sighed. "I suppose you've done your homework." "We've done more than that. We're prepared to cover your asking price. In cash, today." That last word did the trick. By the time Jamal re-entered the dealership, still dressed in the same jeans and t-shirt, Blake was already on his way over, phone pressed to his ear, eyebrows raised. The staff barely noticed. They were too busy with other customers, too busy assuming Jamal was back to dream some more. Blake extended a hand. "Mr. Carter, let's talk in my office." Heads started to turn. A few employees paused, watching Jamal walk past the luxury cars without hesitation, past the salesman who'd mocked him, who barely registered his return. No scene, no raised voice, just calm, quiet business. The craziest part? The salesman even gave Jamal a condescending little nod as he walked by, like he still thought he was winning. But here's what he didn't know. That nod? It would be the last act of authority he'd ever show to Jamal. Because inside the owner's office, pens were about to hit paper, and ownership was about to change hands. Behind the closed office door, the air felt heavier, but not for Jamal. For Mr. Blake, this wasn't just a casual business meeting anymore. He could tell by the calm certainty in Jamal's eyes. This wasn't a bluff. Jamal laid out the proposal in clear, confident terms. Full ownership, immediate transfer, staff contracts to be reviewed, terms clean and above market rate, no haggling, no drawn-out negotiations. Cash. Blake leaned back, exhaling slowly. "That's quite the offer." "It's the right offer," Jamal replied. There was a beat of silence. Blake glanced out the office window, watching his sales team shuffle around the showroom floor, probably thinking about all the times his staff had mishandled customers, all the complaints he'd ignored. And now, that negligence had cost him the dealership. "All right," Blake finally said. "Let's get the paperwork started." Within minutes, calls were made, lawyers looped in, documents drafted, signatures arranged. And while all of this moved quietly behind the scenes, the salesman, the one who had confidently dismissed Jamal not 20 minutes ago, was still walking the floor, oblivious. In his mind, he'd already won the day. Another poor customer brushed aside, another problem solved. But here's the thing. The real problem wasn't Jamal's presence. It was his assumption that power looked a certain way. And now, that assumption was about to cost him more than his pride. As the final signatures were placed on the paperwork, Mr. Blake stood and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The dealership is yours." Jamal didn't smile out of victory. He smiled because, for the first time, the game had changed. And he'd changed it with nothing but patience, strategy, and the power they never saw coming. Now it was time to introduce himself properly. Mr. Blake gathered the staff on the showroom floor. Salesmen, managers, receptionists, even the service techs from the back were called up front. Most assumed it was a routine update, maybe a team meeting, nothing unusual. The salesman who had dismissed Jamal leaned casually against a pillar, arms crossed, already bored. If anything, he was eager to get back to his real customers. Blake cleared his throat. "I have an important announcement. As of today, the dealership has been sold." A ripple of surprise swept through the staff. Whispered questions, wide eyes. The dismissive salesman frowned, glancing around. This wasn't what he'd expected. "Our new owner will be introducing himself shortly," Blake continued. All eyes turned toward the office door. It opened. Jamal stepped out, head held high, still in those same jeans and that same light blue t-shirt. No sudden makeover, no flashy jewelry. Just the man they had all ignored, judged, and dismissed, now standing at the front of the room. For a second, there was dead silence. Not even a breath. Then, the whispers started. "Wait, that's him? The guy from earlier? No way." But the salesman didn't whisper. His face turned pale. His arms slowly dropped to his sides. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "I'm Jamal Carter," he said simply, "and I'm the new owner of this dealership." A few staff members looked down at the floor. Others exchanged nervous glances. The salesman just stared, frozen. "To those of you who treated me with respect earlier, thank you. For those who didn't," Jamal paused. locking eyes with the man who had sent him to the used car lot. Let's just say things are about to change. The crazy part? No one said a word. They didn't have to. The power had already shifted. The room felt it, the salesman felt it. And Jamal? He finally felt something he'd been denied for far too long. Recognition. On his own terms. The weight of Jamal's words settled over the room like a thundercloud. I'm the new owner. At first, no one moved. No one breathed. The salesman, the same man who had smirked, belittled, and humiliated Jamal less than an hour ago, stood frozen. His arms, once confidently crossed, now hung awkwardly at his sides. His face paled as if the blood had drained right out of him. He forced a nervous chuckle. Mr. Carter, listen, about earlier. But Jamal raised a hand. Don't. That single word silenced him. The entire staff, receptionists, other salesmen, the finance manager, even the service techs who had wandered in from the garage, stood in stunned silence. Some looked down at the floor. Others exchanged glances, their earlier judgment and amusement evaporating into dread. Mr. Blake, the former owner, stepped forward, clearing his throat. As part of the ownership change, Mr. Carter will be reviewing all staff conduct and performance, effective immediately. The dismissive salesman seemed to shrink in place. Some of you, Jamal continued, treated me and countless others with professionalism and respect. I see you, and I value that. He let his gaze sweep across the staff. Some nodded, hopeful, grateful. They knew who they were. But others, Jamal continued, his eyes locking onto the salesman, have not. The silence was crushing now. Even the customers nearby had stopped browsing, sensing something monumental was unfolding. Let me be very clear, Jamal said, his voice steady and calm. This dealership will no longer tolerate discrimination. No more judging people by how they look. No more assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. There was a nervous shuffling of feet. One of the junior salespeople, who had given Jamal a respectful nod earlier, straightened his shoulders, as if standing a little taller now. If you can't work with that policy, Jamal continued, you're free to leave, right now. No one moved. Not a soul. The salesman licked his lips, desperate. Mr. Carter, I didn't mean anything by it. It was just, a misunderstanding. I was doing my job. Your job, Jamal replied, was to sell cars, not to sell people short. A few staff members murmured agreement. Quiet, but undeniable. From this day forward, Jamal declared, this dealership will be known for two things: excellence and respect. Every person who walks through these doors will be treated with dignity, no matter what they wear, where they come from, or what you assume about them. His gaze lingered on the salesman one final time. That includes me. And with that, the conversation was over. The salesman's shoulders slumped in defeat, not just because he'd kept his job, for now, but because he knew he had been seen for exactly who he was. And Jamal? Jamal had been seen for who he truly was, too. Not just a customer, not just a businessman, but the man who had rewritten the rules. And in his dealership, respect wasn't optional. It was the new price of admission. The weight of the moment didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Jamal took a slow breath and looked out at the faces before him, some anxious, some ashamed, a few quietly proud, but all waiting for what came next. He could have fired the salesman on the spot. Some expected him to. After all, that's what people usually did in stories like this. Revenge, humiliation, instant karma. But that wasn't Jamal's style. That was their game, not his. I know some of you are expecting me to clean house today, Jamal began. To make an example, the salesman stared at the floor, shoulders tight, bracing for the blow. But that's not why I bought this dealership. A few staff members glanced up, surprised. See, I didn't work my whole life just to repeat the same cycle, to punish people the way they've punished me. I came here today looking for one car, but now I found something more important." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. This place, like a lot of places, has a culture problem. People judged by how they look, not who they are. Customers disrespected before they even say a word. Staff ignored when they try to speak up. The room stayed silent. Even the customers across the showroom listened. "That ends today." Jamal's voice remained calm, but it had the steady power of someone who wasn't just making a statement. He was setting a new standard. No more dismissing people because of their skin, their clothes, or their accent. No more whispering behind customers' backs. No more shutting people out because they don't look wealthy enough to matter. The salesman lifted his head slightly, eyes wide. A glimmer of hope flickered. Was he about to be spared? "As for you," Jamal said, looking directly at him, "you stay." A ripple of confusion moved through the staff. "Not because I condone what you did, but because change only happens when people face their mistakes and learn from them. You judged me by my appearance. Now you'll have to work every day under the leadership of someone you underestimated." The salesman swallowed hard. "I understand, Mr. Carter." "Do you?" Jamal asked quietly. "Because here's the thing. You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected every hardworking person who walks into this place hoping to be seen, to be treated like they belong. From now on, everyone belongs." One of the younger salespeople, a woman who had watched the whole scene unfold with wide eyes, stepped forward slightly. That's exactly what this place needs, sir." Jamal nodded. "It's what every place needs." He turned back to the staff. "So here's the deal. I'm not firing anyone today, but I am watching how you treat customers, how you treat each other. You have a choice. Grow with this dealership or find somewhere else that fits your old way of thinking." Silence. Then, slowly, a few heads nodded. Then, more. The energy in the room shifted from fear to possibility. "Good," Jamal said, "because I didn't buy this dealership to punish people. I bought it to prove something. That respect is earned, but it should also be expected." And just like that, a new chapter began. Not just for Jamal, not just for the staff, but for every customer who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Today wasn't about a car anymore. It was about rewriting the rules. Word spread fast. By the end of the day, customers were already posting on social media. "You won't believe what just happened at this dealership. The man they laughed at now owns the whole place." Finally, a business that respects everybody. The story caught fire. Local news picked it up, then national outlets, then influencers who championed stories of resilience and justice. It wasn't just about a man buying a dealership anymore. It was about turning judgment into opportunity, humiliation into leadership, prejudice into progress. And the craziest part? Jamal didn't plan any of it for publicity. He had only wanted two things that morning: a Lamborghini and the simple respect that should come with being a customer. Instead, he'd walked out with something much bigger: a platform. Within weeks, business at the dealership skyrocketed, not because of gimmicks or flashy ads, but because people wanted to buy from someone who stood for something. A place where respect wasn't earned through appearance. It was the starting point. Jamal didn't change much about the cars. They still sold luxury, still carried the finest models, but he changed the culture. Every new hire went through inclusion training. Staff meetings started with customer service pledges. And as for the salesman who had dismissed him, he stayed, quietly, humbly, and every day he learned the lesson Jamal had offered him. One act of judgment can cost a sale, but it can also cost your dignity. Months later, Jamal finally did buy that Lamborghini, but he didn't drive it off the lot with a smug grin or a victory lap. He handed the keys to his mother. "For every time they told you I wouldn't make it," he said, "we'll drive past those places together. And as for the dealership, It wasn't just a business anymore. It became a symbol, a reminder that respect is priceless, but it's also powerful. And when the world tries to count you out, sometimes the best response is to own the whole room. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by how you look, only to prove everyone wrong? Drop a like if you believe respect should never be earned through appearance. And subscribe for more real stories where the underdog always gets the last word.